Welcome, everybody, to Mindset Monday. I'm your host, Denise Zach. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got an amazing guest, as usual, one of Game Plan U's executives in residence. I will introduce him in just a moment, but I want to tell you a little bit about this podcast and about the Game Plan U community if you don't already know about it. So the Game Plan U community is an organization that supports startups in the sports, tech, and innovation world, and we bring founders in to validate, to innovate, to transform, and to grow as startups. And these are amazing people who are passionate and invested in their startup, and really we bring them together to support one another, to get deal flow, to get mentorship, to get support in the work that they have to do. And it has been one of the greatest opportunities that I've had as a professional to be able to work with a lot of these founders. We have these executives in residence that provide mentorship and deal flow and support with our founders as well. And we also have a vertical where we bring on eager students, recent graduates, people who are transforming themselves and pivoting from one career to another, who want to learn more about sports technology and sports innovation, and we bring them in to support the founders as well. So if you want to learn more about Game Plan U, go to www.gameplanu.org and check us out. This podcast is part of that Game Plan U community. This podcast is about getting into those 6 inches in between your ears. I work with our founders. I talk with our executives and our students really about what makes you tick, what goes on in your head on a day-to-day basis that allows you to be effective and skillful and show up in a strategic way, in a creative way. And how do you overcome adversity? That's what this podcast is about. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring on Mr. Steve Gilman. Steve Gilman is one of our executives in residence. He's an amazing person who seems to have done it all. He has been a founder himself, in the military, in sports. He's done so many different things. He's the co-founder and CEO of ACIES. Without further ado, Mr. Steve Gilman, how are you today?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Happy Monday.
Yeah, happy Monday to you. Happy Mindset Monday to you. Welcome. That's and thanks for coming on. So you've done so many different things in your life. I mean, from military to sports to businesses. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey? Kind of walk us through who you are and kind of how you ended up today in the world that you're in now with your startup, your current startup.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. My background is at the least non-traditional. So I have a few different paths that I try to weave together with passion and discipline that hopefully you'd see in all of them. I went to college, bright-eyed and bushy-tail. I played baseball and I did a little engineering. So I wanted to create options for myself later in life. And that's been kind of the continuous path that I've been on. I was fortunate enough out of undergrad to get drafted by the Tigers and play professional baseball for a few years. I then went into the rest of life after retiring from the game and spent a bit of time in the Department of Defense, traveled overseas, met some really great people and went to some interesting places, had some good experiences. At the end of the day, I ended up looking where else I could gather some experience and broaden my horizons. I went back to get an MBA. That landed me back in New York. As soon as I got back into New York, I realized that the big path of the corporations that I had previously worked for as a part-time contractor or in the off-season of my baseball career wasn't going to be my path forward for the rest of life. So I started my first business in 2015, Block Party. It wove together my passion for sports, for business models, as well as challenges. And I teamed up with a great co-founder there and built a team, ran that down in Dallas, Texas for about 5 to 6 years. I recently moved back up to the New York area to co-found a company with my CTO and good friend. And we're off to the races. So I'm an operator at heart. I wasn't always this way, but I like carving out a path that's different than what I saw in a lot of organizations I've been part of. And I also, you mentioned the military. I got back into military reserves, so I'm a lieutenant in the Navy. And I spent some time working with sailors, shipmates, and a lot of interesting things. There's no way to not be involved in what's going on around the world in the position, and that was the goal.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for the future and what it holds.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing path that you've been on, and just the last few days, for whatever reason, that word path and people's journeys have been coming up for me. So apropos that this is kind of what you're describing today is just this very varied path, right? Of a lot of different things, but a lot of commonality as well in terms of how you operate as a person. That passion, dedication, motivation, hard work, you have to have that in all of the areas you're talking about. You have to have it in business, you have to have it in military, you have to have it in sports. You can't be successful in life without those things. So um, I want to get to ACIES as well, because I want to learn about that platform as well, because I know that it's a really, really cool space that you're building there. But can you tell us a little bit about what you think drives you the most? Like, if you had to pick a characteristic about who you are, what is the thing that you think stands out most for you in terms of just who you are?
Yeah. So, I think that I've always been described as driven, good, bad, or otherwise, right? Like I'm always focused on something that will get me somewhere. And I often kind of look at, and this is not evident in the time when you're trying a new career or new job or new company. Um, but I often kind of weave it together with this notion of a tradition. You want to either break down a tradition, be part of a tradition, or build a tradition. So if you think about um, where you went to school, your alma mater, you were attracted to the traditions there within academic, the passion, the diversity, the culture, and things like that. And you want to either be part of the culture or build upon it. There's also things that you may not enjoy in society or in business, right? Like, hey, I see this process and there's a better way to do it. And so you're breaking down the walls there. What I do is I try to get with people that are passionate about the same goals, big, small, or huge organizations, right? And try to understand what we're trying to do because it's the legacy you leave behind you at a company, in a job, the way the world works. And so, in the past, I've been part of traditions like the military. Right now, I'm building my own tradition. And I think that's where you get the most satisfaction out of what you're doing, taking your skills and applying them to something that's going to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point that you make. I mean, it's being driven and doing everything that you want to do and create in your life, but holding on to traditions as well in that process, learning from what you've observed, what you've been a part of, and growing from there. Not always just maintaining a tradition, but like you said, building where you need to, pivoting where you need to, and changing. When did you decide that you wanted to start this last project? What came up for you? What was it that kind of spawned the idea that, I need to do something different. I need to pivot and change. So here you were in the business world doing some stuff, and then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, maybe it was progression. You tell me, but
Yeah.
how did you get into ACIES and what you're building now?
Yeah. It's a great question. So almost in every career um, that I've had, I looked at who ran the organization or how great could you be, right? So in baseball, like, hey, you're that all-star.
Hmm.
And are you willing to spend the years it takes to have a chance to be that individual? If you're at a larger company, right? Like, hey, I want to be the CEO or the chief technical officer, right? And am I willing to spend the next 40 years of my life to be in that role? You can easily visualize it. The reason I got into startups is because you carve your own path. You can't see what you can become. You just know that there's greatness to be held, right? So there's a lot of ambiguity, but there's also, um, a lot of imagination that can take place. With Block Party, we started it right out of school. And in fact, I had one of those stories. I'm relatively risk adverse as an individual. At
Okay.
least I was back in the day. But I actually accepted a job at IBM thinking that was going to be my path
Yeah.
and worked my way out of it, raised the capital needed. After about 4 or 5 years, you start to understand in that industry, in that business, what excelling looks like and what leadership looks like. And I think for me, I took all the career paths I put together, my background, interests, the type of people I wanted to spend time with, and said, you know what, it'd be great to get into a tech venture. I want to be in New York City, and I want to get into an industry that's learning and developing other professionals. And that's how ACIES kind of culminated. And so for the next 10, 20 years of my life, I want to carve a path where greatness means putting those three things together.
Love it. And all under the guise of kind of helping others, under the umbrella of kind of giving back and helping others develop and grow, which I really love. And I really think it's cool too that we learn a lot about what we don't like and what we don't want by being at different jobs and in different situations and experiences throughout our life. Those are just as important and sometimes more important than the good things that happen to us. And we can observe what we like and what we don't like in our bosses and our coworkers and our work environments in our lives, and then say, okay, I see that, and now I want to create something, taking all the good that I've observed, all the stuff that I know isn't going to work for me, and create something, meaningful that I'm passionate about. And it sounds like that's exactly what you've done, if I'm understanding you correctly.
Yeah, no, you put it together very eloquently. I mentioned being a little risk adverse, so I was very comfortable being part of larger organizations and having that kind of structure in place, but comfortable in the way that um, uh, I enjoyed being around the people and learning. And there's always stuff to learn in any kind of organization, but breaking out of that mold, I actually believe that I needed to go back to business school. And what business school for me was 2 years of exploring things I didn't want to be.
Mm.
So I immediately knew I wasn't going to go into finance down on Wall Street, just culturally and interest and everything else. I knew I wasn't going to be a consultant, not by choice. I was actually turned down at my top job, right?
Mm.
So that wasn't an option for me anymore. And that's what created to like, hey, let me go spend some time while I have a .edu after my name with some startup companies and see what this is about. And so by process of eliminating what I didn't want to be, I fell into something that I was very passionate about, and it opened up a world for me. So eliminating the avenues so you don't have to think about them again is just as important as figuring out what you do want to do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I want to dive in a little bit more to the risk averse piece, because where you're at right now, there's risk. I mean, you took some risks. You definitely dove in. So a lot of times people who are risk averse stay exactly where they are and they don't dive in. They become paralyzed, or they're just too fearful, or they try a little bit but they give up really easily when they get in their first no, or something doesn't work out the way they want. So can you talk a little bit about how you've overcome the risk aversion to be able to do exactly what you're doing now? Because I'm telling you, from my standpoint and all the founders I've worked with, it's a lot of responsibility to take an entire company on your shoulders, and there is risk there. So let's hear about how Steve has overcome those fears or those concerns, and what led you to where you are.
Yeah, so I think I'm still risk adverse, right? There's no kind of changing that. I'm motivated by setting high goals and then making sure I don't fail to get there. So I have a healthy dose of fear. I think when I started Block Party, I had enough passion for it that I tossed all the risk aside. And so part of it was I know this idea is going to work, right? And I believe in
Yeah.
the people that I'm working with it. That helps throw aside. The other thing is planning for what you think is risky. So, I mean, the downside, right? I let down my family or people that count on me. I drain my bank account to where I can't recover, right? And all these different things that culminate with risk. Through my first experience, I understood what was risky about what I did. I mean, I came out of grad school with no money, to start a company. That in itself is risky, but also going back to a corporation like IBM, which is a great corporation, right? But if I'm there for another 5 or 6 years, there's a good chance I'm not going to take the risk that I am now. So
Mm.
the chance to not, grow and continue on a path that I knew I wanted was to me more riskier than draining a bank account.
Okay.
Now, it is, and I know you asked a lot of guests about this, it's important to plan, right? So if family and having some savings is important, then do what you need to do to get that plan in place. I'm
Yeah.
always a big advocate of taking the leap and trusting yourself,
Mm.
but it's not without understanding, putting a plan in place and making sure you hit goals and everything in between. And once you eliminate the risks, then it's all about just passion and going after what you want.
I love it. And the what you're describing is mitigated risk, right? Everybody thinks, oh, founders, they're, cowboys, it's the Wild West, they're just diving in and taking all these crazy risks. And really, the successful founders are the ones who are mitigating their risk, which is planning it, thinking, okay, what's going to be the too much push, right? What's just the right amount that I need to risk at this point to get what I need to get and be successful without risking it all, right? So there's that, and I think that's such an important thing to bring up, especially if there's founders who are going to be watching this, to make sure that you're making the right kinds of risks, you're taking the right kinds of risks. But you also said something else really cool, that there was a risk of you not doing something, right? And I think people think risk is doing something you've never done before, but for you, the risk was stagnation or kind of losing your fire inside or not achieving what you wanted to achieve. And that was a risk for you. And I think sometimes people don't see that. So I think that's an interesting piece to what you're talking about as far as risk is concerned.
Yeah, there's two things that kind of come to mind throughout my career, that as I look back are interesting, and I understand how it's very practical, but didn't make sense to me. So the first one, I left a great government Department of Defense job. I got to travel around. I got to work with the best people. Everything was stable. It's a great family, everything in between. And it was intellectually stimulating. So I had a good time. I left to go to full-time business school, right? So I'm cutting off a salary. I'm paying to go to business school. I'm going in one of the most expensive cities in the world, New York, right?
Right.
But on my way out the door, and I'm 28 years old at this point, right? I feel like I'm old enough to be taken seriously, but young enough to take any kind of real risks, right? There's
Yeah.
no one really counting on me. I walked out the door and someone came up to me that worked for the government. It's just like, man, just so you know, Steve, I don't approve of what you're doing. The job market's hard out there. I don't understand what you would be doing beyond working here and growing. You've done such a good job. And he said, don't you understand the risks? And my mind didn't go to like, I'm not going to find something, or it's not going to be a great experience in the future. My mind went to like, holy crap, you're right. I think I have a shirt and a tie at the dry cleaners downstairs in my office. The only risk of me leaving right now is that I forgot to get those. So let me grab those and then I'm out the door. And at the end of the day, it was confidence in myself. It was confidence that there was a better culture out there that did encourage people to chase their dreams. And the last one, I'll keep brief. I mentioned I interned with IBM in between my first and second year of business school. I had a great experience. I was given a job offer. I worked myself out of the job offer with the passion for Block Party. When you go back and say, hey, IBM, I'm not coming, I know I told you I would. I had to go back and explain all of that to my business school, which puts all their efforts in building relationships there within. And the last person that tried to talk me out of it, like, hey, you should accept this job. And I said, well, I want to start a company and I have the means to do it, right? Or at least a path I can kind of see. They said, yeah, but if you go work at the company, you'll be there for 5 or 6 years. You'll be a better leader, right? If you have IBM on your resume and you have this executive program, people are going to want to follow you. It's not the way I thought about it. I thought about losing 5 years of my life to something that I knew I wasn't passionate about. And if I needed to gain more leadership experience in 5 years, going through a corporation wasn't the way to do it for me, right? It was to start something and try something. And luckily I was right. Whether I'm blinded by that or anything else, I didn't want to spend 5 or 6 years gaining experience so then I can go on my passion if you have the ability to do so now.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, it's such a powerful message, and I think just that, just really highlighting that you are a true entrepreneur at heart. I mean, that is just what your spirit is. You're just, you know, and you have the confidence to be able to do it, right? A lot of people wish and fantasize and, hope for a chance to do something like that, but they want to stay in that safety and that security, and they get wrapped up in that mindset of you're getting a gift right now. There's a bird in your hand right now. Keep it. Don't try to, go someplace else or look for something else. So I think it's just really says a lot about just who you are at your core, and that you paid attention to that more than. And for me, when I think about this, as a therapist for 20 years, it wasn't just your logic that you paid attention to. You were paying attention to the kind of emotional intelligence as well, like your intuition and what you thought was important. And I think sometimes people are saying, oh, just follow this logical path. This is a logical thing to do. Don't you see? This is the right thing. It's right in front of you. But you had a different energy as well, that kind of emotional passion and fire and grit to do something else. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. And I was just thinking, if you're asking for advice from logical people, you'll get logical advice. So no one's wrong in their advice. As long as they care enough, everybody's bringing their spirit. So had I had been at a job that was stable, 9 to 5, chance to grow, and I asked people around that had been there for years what they thought I should do, I already know the answers they're going to give, right? When you surround yourself with a community of people that are trying to go for something different, you're going to find they're giving different advice. So the idea of grit, which is a word I use all the time, especially when talking to startups, and the fire you have for something, it doesn't inherently come out of an individual that thinks they can just take over and change the world. It comes from a community. And what I mean by that is I spent 2 or 3 days negotiating with IBM as to whether they can defer me coming on in case my startup didn't work. And ultimately they said, no, we're not deferring. You either come here or you don't. I went directly to my co-founder of Block Party. I went directly to the community I was surrounded myself with in the startup community. I was like, man, I'm a little bummed out. What if they're right? Like, there's no safety net. And those people that I trusted that loved what they were doing looked at me and said, you got this, right? There's no worries. We know you enough. You're going to carve out your own path. We don't worry about you coming back and asking for a job in 6 months, right? Like, you're going to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And so it's not without being bolstered up by people that you want to emulate that helps you find that path. And along the way comes the grit and the fire and the passion, but always that support and advice. You just want to be mindful of who you're getting that advice from, because it comes from a different perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you value all of it, and then you make your decision based on what sits the best with you and what feels like the right connection, right? And so, yeah, relationships are so important. It's so important to know who we are around, are people that we trust, that are going to build us up, that are going to not blow smoke and not, cut us down and impede us. So you don't want someone who's going to make you feel like you're better than you are. You don't want someone that's going to make you feel like you're worse than you are, but people who are realistic about, what you have and where you can go and how you can grow. So it sounds like you've done a lot of that over the years, like paying attention to all the messages and really aligning yourself with the people that are more kind of in tune with where you're at in your life and what you wanted to achieve.
That's it, right? Different perspectives, people that care about you and where you're going, people that believe in you, and you meet more every day, right? Yeah. And you find yourself giving advice to people every day from your perspective. And so it's just important to keep that in mind. People always need others to challenge them. They need them to be supportive in any kind of way. And this is not just for career, right? This is family, this is friends, and everything in between.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's one of the reasons that Game Plan U and communities are building together remotely, in person, whatever. It's hard to figure out who you are on your own, which is, it sounds nuts, right? Like you just, for me, I can't just go sit on a beach in France and learn more about myself, right? I need to bounce myself off a lot of different people to get perspectives, people that I respect.
Yeah. No, I like that. I really think that's so important. And, you mentioned Game Plan U, and you've been a member of the community for a while now. What excites you about the community because of you've got this startup world around you now in Game Plan U, but you are a startup and you've had exits before. So what excites you about being a part of the Game Plan U community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll take that first part. I'm an operator at heart, right?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing about the startup world is I'm a few months into a new project. Most of the groups that I talk to, mentor, especially in Game Plan U, have more traction, more product, larger teams, raise more money than I do, right? So we share different perspectives, which is really refreshing in that way. I think what Game Plan U is doing right is building the norms around what a community should be. So yes, there's capital and there's ideas and there's people that want to work, right, and that have the passion for it. But the norm around respecting each other's time, the norm around paying it forward, backwards, left and right, the norms about supporting each other. It's a platform to make sure that everybody can achieve their wildest dreams. And there's things that are in your control and there's things that aren't. But at least there's a professional norm around how to go about being part of a community. And if you're not part of a community, it's hard to understand. But that's what makes it so easy and refreshing to be a part of.
Yeah, and we're really just grateful that you're a part of it too, because you help create that norm and those supports that we are really, really invested in with our founders. But I want to dive into ACIES. I want you to tell us about ACIES and everything you're doing with it, because I absolutely love this platform. I think it's amazing. So tell us a little bit about it.
Sure. Yeah, so ACIES is a learning and development platform where we help manage professional development budgets for companies as they deploy them to employees. So my co-founder and I dug into this world of how people get lifetime learning, right? Like, how do you stay intellectually stimulated? How do you learn new skills? How do you expand your horizons after a formal degree? Yeah. It's largely up to employers. And what we've noticed is employers' best shot of making sure that each individual feels invested in comes in the form of a stipend or a personal budget, or, hey, we just care about you, use this money throughout the year for what you want. Our platform aligns what the employee wants and what the company wants, all in a single streamlined workflow. That just means that employees learn and develop in the ways they want to, be it an online course, going to conferences, getting coaching and mentoring services, and the companies get what they want out of a stronger team and workforce. And the benefit for us, going in and doing that is it's important to understand the data between what works in the resources and what doesn't for corporations. And largely there's been disconnect between education and what corporations are actually trying to do to attract, retain, and upskill individuals. Yeah. So we're excited to take that on. And we're excited to build platforms where managers can better mentor their employees in less time, more efficiently. And if we win and start solving and hacking away at this global problem, we will be teaching companies what their employees are learning to upskill to keep up with the needs, instead of companies retroactively trying to train their employees. Yeah. And that's really the key. It's now in these generations entering the workforce that the employees and companies actually want the same thing. It's growth and productivity. Mm-hmm. And so we just align those.
It's great. I really like that, the strategy of bringing both of those goals together, right? That companies want their employees to stay engaged and keep learning, and employees really want to better themselves and show up the best that they can to work. And it allows a little bit of freedom and flexibility within that, where they're both kind of meeting their needs and their goals, but walking kind of down a path together. Are there certificate programs? Can companies tailor what areas they want their employees to focus in on? How do some of the specifics work?
Yeah, so I think the first key about our technology is we have a user curated marketplace, which means we don't produce the resources. We rather point you towards the ones that are recommended using our artificial intelligence technology.
Yeah.
But user curated means that any employee, manager, head of HR, admin, head of company can bring the resources they need onto the platform. And that's the key for expanding outside of what's normally corporate learning. An
Yeah.
example would be if a sales force is able to, within their policy, attend different conferences or webinars, they can bring those onto the platform and we can start to understand what employees want. The second part is what managers will approve. So there's all types of different policies we're helping to codify right now between, hey, you can use these dollars on an online course, but you have to show us a certificate. Makes sense. You can use these on a purchase on Amazon to buy a book. And as soon as you get that book and start reading it, we'll reimburse you. We leave it up to the manager. The manager of an employee is the person that you want to get involved from the beginning to make sure it ties to corporate strategy. And you want to get involved for the employee's sake to make sure that they know what they're doing and it aligns with where they're going to go in life. And so largely we're a platform with a workflow that allows managers to sign off. This is a great resource. This is going to help the company. And once they do so, they're able to share it, which we largely don't see in software or in corporations now. If something works for this role in this competitive landscape at this time, why not share it amongst your company with the click of a button, right? And so we're just bringing technology and codifying that to make sure that there's a way that employees and companies understand about personal investments.
That's great. And it's I love the virtual aspect of this as well, because a lot of times especially in the corporate world, people were sent for 3, 4, 6, 8 weeks away to these universities to take these intensive trainings in person. And now with platforms like this, they're able to kind of tailor specifically what they need. And they could do it at, if they can't sleep at 1 a.m, as opposed to having to get up and go, somewhere and leave their job and leave family and stuff like that behind, but also just the intensiveness of those programs. So I really like the kind of tailored freedom that comes from what your platform is offering.
Yeah, thank you. And you were one of the first people I talked about, yourself and Rob and Mike at Game Plan U, when I said, I have an idea, let me just bounce it off. And you tell me, you're going to tell me I'm crazy, but let me see what you think. And so your past work with universities helped a lot with this.
Yeah.
It's important that flexibility and being able to learn things in a quick snippets or longer periods of time when you have sit down, everybody does it in their own way. The cool thing that we've seen in the industry, and the reason that we don't produce our own classes or write our own books or do our own coaching services, is because the market of providers out there is growing and they're responding quickly. So point in case, universities, instead of going back and getting a master's degree for $50,000, right? You can start to build these certificates of really tactile skills that usually fit within the stipends your company provides. And so we've seen these resources, which are largely unattainable unless you take time off of work,
right?
Now attainable. They're flexible. They're easy for the cost of the company to be provided. And they show your skills right at the end of the day. And so you complete things how you want to complete things. And we see the market continuing like that. Sources will be more readily available. Crowd-generated content, platforms like Teachable and Thinkific, where people can upload their own classes. Hey, I have a really good skill in XYZ software. I can teach designers how to do it, and I charge a little bit of money for it. No one says that's not good for corporate learning. There's just no way to plug that in right now without our technology.
Yeah. And I imagine that as you continue to grow, all of this will just continue to expand and you'll create more opportunities. And, the benefit for you is that the more content there is out there, the more certificate programs that develop, the more online learning classes that are meaningful that managers are recommending or corporations are suggesting, that just adds to your your opportunity for employees and employers. So I think it's like the world is working for you, right? It's like one of
That's
the
it.
best times to have a platform like this.
It's the we're not getting in the way of the world. We're just facilitating it through a platform.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
the discovery we did around the disconnect between companies and their employees when it comes to investments was relatively easy to understand. It was going to a university that's looking to plug into a corporation and finding out the way they did that was to pay consultants to tell them where the world's going so then they can produce classes, then they can find a marketplace and list it online. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Employees already know where they want to go to get resources at all levels. The
yeah.
CEO of a company is an employee. And so these individuals know where they want to go. They just need lower barriers to actually get it. So, hey, academic university, you're looking for what the right content at the right time is. Our platform has that data. There's no study around any inherent study that you do is going to be wavelengths behind where corporations need to go at this moment. And so we're just a conduit for the world's best resources to get into corporate learning and development.
I love it. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think I wish you the best with it. I think it sounds like an awesome platform, and it's got so many different opportunities, and it sounds very expansive. So I know that I'm excited for you all, and I'm so excited that you're a part of our community because you can just give that information, give that wealth, and help our founders grow as well with the platform, which I think is awesome. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so you've got a one pager.vc that ACIES is listed on, and it's updated all the time with the latest and greatest things that are happening with ACIES, right? And all of the advertising and things like that you're doing, and crowdfunding and all of that, right? So
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
is a great place to check more of that out, again, at the aciesedge.com. If they want to get in touch with you, they can go to Steve Gilman 26 at LinkedIn. Um, any last words you have for someone who might be watching that's thinking about starting a business?
Yeah, I think I'd touch back on that risk portion, right? I think a lot of times if you haven't been in startup land, as I've been referring it to, right, where things are a little bit different, a little more intense, a little more unique, um, you tend to envy folks who have taken great risks, the Elon Musks of the world, right? That is fearless and understands all those things. I think the thing that I would encourage is understand what's risky to you and then work to mitigate it. There's no secret if you start a company, that is your job 24 hours a day, right? There's no breaks. It's not a 9 to 5. Let me figure out the risks and mitigate it. You're always problem solving. So do it for your personal life first. See if something really matters that much that's holding you back from actually jumping in full time. I'll tell you, there's 101 different answers, right? And so you may have a different path than I experienced or that other entrepreneurs have experienced. But what makes you comfortable to drive and go after your passion? We only have so much time on earth. So the sooner you do that, the better off you'll be in a spot that you want to be.
Yeah. This isn't a dress rehearsal, right? So get out there.
That's it. That's it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Steve, for being here. I greatly appreciate your time. I look forward to our continued working together with Game Plan U and all of the growth that's going to be happening with ACIES. And thank you all for being here again. This is Mindset Monday. If you want to learn more about Game Plan U, again, you can go to gameplanu.org. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can find me at LinkedIn and this long number afterwards, but hey, just copy and paste. And if you like this podcast and you want to hear more about mindset and getting into those 6 inches in between your ears, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye, Steve. Thanks again.
Thanks, Denise. Thank you so much.